The news moved faster than anyone expected, rippling far beyond South Bend and the familiar boundaries of college football, because it spoke to something deeper than wins, losses, or recruiting rankings. According to an announcement attributed to Marcus Freeman and his wife, the Notre Dame head coach and his family made a decision that reframed how many people see leadership, sacrifice, and purpose. They revealed that they intended to donate what was described as their entire income for the first half of 2025, including salary-related earnings and outside compensation, to organizations supporting homeless families. In a sport often dominated by contract numbers and market value, the story cut through the noise not because of its scale alone, but because of the conviction behind it. Freeman has long been known publicly as a coach guided by faith and humility, someone who speaks about responsibility in terms that extend well beyond the field. This moment, however, placed those words into a sharper, more tangible light. In explaining the decision, he framed it not as a gesture designed for attention, but as a calling that had been weighing on him for years. He spoke about listening, about discernment, about believing that leadership carries obligations that do not end when the stadium lights go dark. The language was quiet and personal, more pastoral than promotional, and that tone set the stage for how the story was received. Within hours, the reaction spilled across college football, faith communities, and social media, where disbelief quickly turned into reflection. People accustomed to seeing generosity measured in carefully structured foundations or symbolic donations were struck by the completeness of the commitment. This was not framed as a portion or a percentage, but as everything for a defined period, offered with the understanding that comfort would be replaced by intentional sacrifice. Whether people viewed it through a religious lens, a moral one, or simply a human one, the gesture forced a pause. It made people stop scrolling. It made them read. What followed, according to those involved with the organizations connected to the effort, was an immediate response that went far beyond money. Shelters reported an influx of calls from families seeking help and from donors asking how they could contribute. Volunteers stepped forward. Conversations began in places where homelessness had long been treated as an abstract problem rather than a personal reality. The Freemans did not present themselves as saviors or centerpieces of the work. Instead, they consistently redirected attention to the families affected, emphasizing dignity over spectacle and sustainability over symbolism. For those closest to Freeman, the decision was less surprising than the public reaction suggested. They describe a man whose sense of purpose has always been anchored in service, whose definition of success has never been confined to scoreboards. At Notre Dame, he often speaks to his players about stewardship, about using their platform responsibly, about understanding that influence is temporary, but impact can be lasting. This act, whether viewed as radical or simply faithful, aligned with the same message he delivers inside the locker room. It was not a pivot in values, it was an extension of them. The ripple effect was immediate and unexpected. Other coaches and athletes, inspired by the story, began quietly exploring ways to contribute within their own means. Some pledged time, others pledged resources, still others simply pledged attention, choosing to amplify the needs of homeless families in their own communities. The moment became less about one family's decision and more about a collective re-examination of what generosity can look like when it is driven by conviction rather than convenience. There was also skepticism, as there always is with stories that feel too big, too emotional, too perfectly timed. Questions surfaced about logistics, about verification, about how such a commitment would function in practice. Freeman did not dismiss those questions. Instead, he acknowledged them, reiterating that the decision was personal and that transparency mattered. He stressed that the focus should remain on the families being served, not on the mechanics of his own household finances. In doing so, he avoided turning the narrative inward, resisting the temptation to defend himself against doubt. What made the story resonate, even among those who questioned its scope, was the absence of self-congratulation. There were no victory laps, no dramatic press conferences, no curated displays of benevolence. The message was delivered plainly, then allowed to stand on its own. In a media landscape accustomed to performative virtue, that restraint felt disarming. It invited conversation rather than applause. For Notre Dame, the moment added another layer to Freeman's identity as a leader. He is already tasked with upholding one of the most tradition-heavy brands in college sports, navigating scrutiny that extends far beyond football. This decision, however, connected the program to something older and broader than athletics. It echoed the university's stated values, linking competition with compassion, excellence with empathy. It reminded people that leadership, when practiced authentically, can blur the line between public role and private conviction. Perhaps the most powerful reactions came not from analysts or fans, but from families who, according to organizations involved, found themselves suddenly seen. For them, the gesture was not about headlines or national reaction. It was about stability, about a chance to breathe, about the possibility of rebuilding without the constant fear of being overlooked. Those stories, shared quietly and respectfully, carried a weight that no viral moment could replicate. In the end, what stunned people was not simply the scale of the pledge, but the clarity of intent behind it. The Freemans did not frame their decision as heroic. They framed it as obedient, as necessary, as something they felt compelled to do. That framing challenged a culture that often celebrates generosity only when it is painless. It suggested that sacrifice, when chosen freely, can still have a place in modern leadership. The story continues to unfold, shaped by the lives it touches and the conversations it sparks. Whether remembered as an extraordinary act or as a reflection of values long held, it has already achieved something rare. It shifted attention away from self and toward need. It replaced cynicism with curiosity, and it reminded a nation, if only for a moment, that compassion does not require perfection, only willingness. In a world accustomed to measuring success in numbers and outcomes, this moment offered a different metric, not wins, not income, not status, but impact. And in that sense, regardless of how the details are ultimately remembered, the legacy of the decision may rest less in what was given and more in what it inspired others to see.